Hi, welcome to this week's Authors Love Readers podcast, where we delve into the stories behind the stories. We're asking authors questions, some of them fun, some of them serious, and from their answers, you're going to learn things you never knew about the people who write the stories you love. My name is Patricia McLinn. I'm your host and designated question asker.
I'm Yvonne Lindsay, and I'm an author who loves readers.
Now, let's start the show. Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of Authors Love Readers podcast. I am delighted to have visiting us this week Yvonne Lindsay from the other side of the world, or maybe we're on the other side of the world. She's from New Zealand, and she is a friend we met online, I'm pretty sure, and then we met in person at an RWA, and then And we spent some quality time at the San Antonio airport, right?
That's right.
after an RWA conference.
People were talking about their worst reviews.
Yes, we were doing dramatic readings of our worst reviews ever. There was a whole group of us. And then there was a group from Australia and Yvonne from New Zealand, and they all got home before I did because I got stranded overnight in Chicago. But that's neither here nor there. So then in 2015, I went to Australia and New Zealand and was delighted to talk to both groups. And in New Zealand, wonderful Yvonne took me around with a young editor, and we had a great day. That was such a fabulous day.
It was beautiful. It was the middle of winter and it was a sunny day. It was just so gorgeous.
It was. The sky was amazing, and we had this terrific lunch at a little riverside inn.
Yeah.
And walked around the black sand beach. Tell me the name of that again.
That was Muriwai Beach. It's on the west coast outside of Auckland.
It was terrific.
Yeah.
Yes. And then we went to the New Zealand Romance Writers Conference, and I highly recommend it if you are around that area at all or can make it. It was a great event and wonderful people. So I am so happy to have Yvonne here with us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, of course. And tell us a little bit. See, I know some, but tell us about, what are you publishing now?
Okay. Primarily, I write for Harlequin Desire. I have had 41 titles contracted with them so far, and I'm working on the last 2 of those contracts at the moment. Those books will be released next year. And yeah, they're a mix of my own standalone stories, my own mini-series, some Harlequin-led series and continuity. So there's quite a bit of variety in there. I've also done a novella for Thule Publishing under their Montana Fair series that came out in 2014. So that would have been the San Antonio conference here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in my spare time, I write nasty, horrible, evil things.
As long as you don't do nasty, horrible, evil things.
No. Someone said to me, what made you decide to write a story like that? I said, well, I hit menopause and I just wanted to kill everybody.
And doing it fictionally is so much better than doing it.
There is still a deep satisfaction.
It's great therapy. I often say that people who have irritated me end up dead in my books. And at various stages in my career, the body count has gone pretty high. And that was a little tricky when I was writing only romance. But and a number of former coworkers, have ended up dead in various books I've had.
Yeah.
So that's we're starting off bloodthirsty here, Yvonne. And you would never know it to talk to either one of us.
No,
people would be shocked.
Absolutely.
Which is part of the fun, isn't
it? Indeed. Still waters, all that sort of thing. Run deep.
Yeah. And bloody. So as long as we're talking that sort of thing, let me ask you, as we start some questions to let readers get to know you, do you have any really horrible fears? And then do you work those into stories?
No. I don't work them into stories. I do have horrible fears. I prefer to run from my fears than face them, although I am trying to be grown up about a lot of my fears. But most of them are, relate to me personally. So I don't tend to put much of me personally into my books.
See, I was thinking, fears, like some people have fears of height and or snakes or spiders or whatever, and putting them into books always strikes me as the best recycling around.
Yeah, well, I'm not particularly fond of bugs and spiders and things like that. My husband is a shift worker, and you can guarantee that if we're going to have a bug in the bedroom, it'll be when he's on night shift and not there to rescue me from it. I go through cans of insect spray, which is probably terrible for the environment and horribly cruel for the insects, but yeah, I'm sorry. My house, insect-free zone.
Well, my deal with the insects, although they might not know it, is that if they are in my house, they're dead. And yes, sometimes I'm not sure that the insect spray kills them so much as they drown.
Yeah.
Outside, I figure that's their, I figure outside is their territory. Okay. I'll try to be more understanding.
Oh, I agree.
But you cross my threshold and you are dead.
I usually ask them very politely to leave. And if they don't, then I get the fly spray.
Do you have moles in New Zealand?
No.
That go under the ground? Well, we do, and they dig up the grass because they tunnel underneath, and they're eating grubs, which is a good thing. But in doing so, it makes it like if you have a lot of moles, it makes it feel like you're walking in swampland on the grass. So when I was in Virginia, I called the county extension agent, and they said, well, what you can do, the person who answered the phone said, you can take this particular kind of chewing gum, wear gloves, take it out of the wrapper, wad it up, and put it in the ground, because they like the taste of it, but they can't digest it. And I said, but so they're starving to death in my lawn? Under my lawn? Can't you
just... that sounds particularly cruel, doesn't it?
I said, can't you just make them go into the woods behind my house? So the person put me on hold and said, well, let me get the head guy. And so I'm on hold. The head guy comes on and he's laughing. And he said, is this the woman who wants to relocate the moles? And I said, yes, that's exactly what I want. And there was no answer for that. So, yeah. So
they just wanted to talk to you to prove that you were a real human being and not just a
joker, I guess.
Yeah.
So we want to relocate the moles and the bugs just out of our territory, right?
Indeed.
Okay. So have you had any surprising jobs?
When I was 13, I lied about my age. One of the advantages of being tall is that people always expect you to be older than you are when you're a kid. And I lied about my age, and I got a job in a store that sold tropical fish and goldfish. So that's probably about the most interesting job I think I've ever had.
Yeah, it is interesting. Now, were you always the tall kid in class?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I was the tall one. Always in the back row of stuff.
Yeah. And when we had to line up for inoculations at school, they would just have the public health nurses come to the school and give everybody their jabs for whatever it was, measles, mumps, rubella, I can't remember, because they do that alphabetically. But because I was a lot taller than the girl who was a W, because my maiden name began with V, they'd always make me go last and her go first because, she's so much smaller than you.
Oh, what difference does that make? That's terrible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was always in the back row with the guys. It was me and the guys, and I was often taller than most of the guys. So, now, when you were a child, and so you were back in those days when you were the tall one, did you have any childhood books that just spoke to you so strongly that you can trace back and say, okay, that's where I got it?
I can't remember a specific time that I was aware that I started to read. I feel like I've always read, which is the weirdest thing. My friends at school used to accuse me of having reading sickness because I'd much rather lie on the bed or on the couch and read than go cycling or roller skating. I mean, I could do all those things, but what was the point? When I was very young, I read a lot of the Enid Blyton books, the Secret Seven and Famous Five stories, which always had a mystery to be solved, which I loved. But there was a book I read. My mum used to take my brother and I to our local library on a Friday evening, and we'd go and get an armful of books. And then, obviously, the next Friday we would take them all back and get our next armful of books. And I remember reading one book which was more of a fantasy. And for the life of me, I've never been able to remember the title or who wrote it. But it was a story about a girl who was sent to live with an aunt in the country, and somewhere along the line there was a well on the property that became a portal to another world, and a boy from the other world came through the well, and he met her, and he would take her back to his world. And I just loved every aspect of that story, and I renewed that book as often I was allowed to before they told me, no, you can't keep renewing this. Someone else wants to read the book. And after that, I never found it on the shelf again. And
no.
Nowadays, I'm wondering, did I even read it? Did I imagine it? But I've always wished I could find that book. So if anybody out there has some idea of what I'm talking about, perhaps they could let me know.
Wouldn't that be wonderful if somebody listening knew what book it was? That would be terrific. Oh, and if they tell you, you have to let me know too, okay?
Yes, I will, I promise.
I can remember being a little older, not the super young, but reading, it was the T.H. White about King Arthur. I want to say The Once and Future King, and that's not right. I think maybe it was The Once and Future King. And he has Merlin living backwards. Remember, did you read that?
I remember the Mary Stuart books, but I didn't come to those until I was an adult.
Well, I can remember taking that book downstairs to the kitchen and saying, "This is so cool, Mom. You got to listen to this. You got to listen to this," and reading parts to her, and her going, "Uh-huh." Uh-huh. But at least she did listen. So that was, and as I said, I was a little older. I already knew I was addicted to stories and books and stuff by that point. But, yeah. Okay, what is your favorite taste?
Oh, I love fresh prawns, just lightly fried in a little bit of butter, perhaps a tiny bit of garlic, and very ripe camembert.
Oh, interesting. Together?
No, either or.
Okay. And do you find New Zealand prawns, do you then eat shrimp in North America, and do you find them different?
Shrimp generally is a more delicate flavour than a prawn. Like, I really like the large prawns, the king prawns or the tiger prawns, that sort of thing. They've got a real crunch to them when you eat them too. So it's not just a flavour, it's an experience.
It's a texture difference.
Yeah, I'm really funny about textures in my mouth. Like, I hate beans. Ugh.
Like green beans?
Oh, any kind of bean.
Oh, that's interesting because I do too. I like navy beans or lima beans.
Oh.
It gives me the willies just to think of that texture. But green beans, I'm fine with, especially fresh green beans. I'm fine with.
I find the green bit too squeaky on my teeth. I don't like that.
Noisy beans. Noisy beans are out.
Yeah, the prawns are in. As is a good right.
Okay. And do you have a favorite color? And is there a story behind that or something associated with it?
I don't know there's anything really associated with it. I've always loved the colour blue. But I've also...
I knew you were going to say that. And you know why? Because it looks wonderful on you.
Oh, thank you. I particularly like the more purpley blues, like the jacaranda blue, or the more lavender tinted, like wisteria. Wisteria is the most beautiful colour. Now, it's neither blue nor purple. So whenever people ask me what is my favourite colour, it's like a purpley blue or a bluey purple.
I think wisteria has the advantage of that's such a wonderful word.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's shift gears. Let me ask you, do you have a motivational or upbeat quote that really means a lot to you, speaks to you?
Well, interestingly enough, I have above my computer a quote from Nora Roberts, which says my top 3 pieces. This is specific to writing, not just to the real world. My top 3 pieces of writing advice: stop whining and write, stop effing around and write, stop making excuses and write. So that would probably be my most motivational writing thing. The Goethe saying about not allowing things which matter least to affect the things that matter most is something I try to remind myself of frequently, because I find life is all about prioritizing, and these days it's so easy to get sucked into things that just eat up your time without allowing you to make purposeful use of your time. So I think the Goethe saying is definitely more about make your priorities clear. Make them clear to yourself as much as to anybody else,
and not get drawn away from them.
True.
Yeah.
And if you do, go back. Just because you got sucked down the rabbit hole doesn't mean you have to stay there.
Very good point. And I think a lot of us do that, and we then we get sucked down the rabbit hole and then kick ourselves for an extended period of time before we actually try to get out of the rabbit hole.
Exactly, which is in itself is a waste of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I one of my sayings is that kicking yourself is not a good exercise program. Okay, so away from kicking ourselves, we're going to do something. I have this strange little desert island that allows you to watch movies, but only 3. You can only watch 3, but you can watch them over and over.
Okay.
So which 3 movies? And you get to know ahead of time you're going, so you get to pick 3 movies. But then you're stuck there. Which 3 movies?
I would choose Sweet Home Alabama. I would choose Sahara. And I would choose Beauty and the Beast. And I'm not fussy whether it's the animated version or the latest release version.
Now, what about those movies speak to you? What is it that catches you?
Sweet Home Alabama is so much about enduring love. Even though the 2 main characters, that it's like they let each other go to pursue their dream, or he let her go so she could pursue her dream, but she still came back anyway.
Then what about Beauty and the Beast?
I just love that people can fall in love without it being like it's a meeting of minds. What lasts in falling in love is the melding of 2 minds, not just the physical attraction.
Oh, and I can see that connects with Sweet Home Alabama too.
Yeah. So we're psychoanalyzing the guest speaker today. You're one sneaky woman.
Moi?
Sorry, but you don't do innocent well.
But I am totally innocent. Absolutely. Okay. Do you have a song that you think kind of speaks to who you are?
At the moment, the more recent one, I love listening to Keala Settle's "This Is Me." It's just so strong, so powerful, so uplifting. I love it. I used to, probably about 20 years ago, I think Gloria Estefan's "Reach" was very, very prominent in my life. I used to play it in the car a lot. It just reminding me to strive for what I wanted, that sort of thing. And I think "This Is Me" is similar. And, Yeah.
Now, do you play music when you write?
I listen to that weird kind of new age music that you usually have playing in a beauty salon when you go for a facial. I find anything without words works very well for me, although I have been known to listen to Il Divo or Andrea Bocelli. I find listening to words sung in a different language doesn't distract me because the words become just a sound in their own.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like just that rainwater running sounds, and I find I do switch off at a certain point, and it's only sort of when I get to the end of my writing session that I've actually gone through about an hour of listening to this without realizing that I was listening to anything. It's almost like it allows my mind to disengage from the world around me and to just focus completely on what I'm doing.
Oh, that's wonderful. It puts me to sleep. I'm zonked. I'm gone. But I do listen to, I've said this before, I tend to listen to movie soundtracks.
Oh, yeah.
With no words. And I love it because in the more dramatic parts where it picks up speed, I type faster and faster and faster.
Oh, it's interesting.
I need my own soundtrack of only the dramatic parts. So I could write really fast.
That's pretty exhausting, though. Yeah, it's funny because my youngest daughter, she works from home some days. She's in the fashion world, and when she's working, she's downstairs in our house. We've got like a third lounge that she's converted into a workroom, and she's also managed to hook up her sound system to the speakers that are down there, and she listens very loudly and sings very loudly along to whichever soundtrack there's. She was really into High School Musical for a while, and then most recently it was all the music from the Greatest Showman. Prior to that, it was all the music from Beauty and the Beast, and yeah. My husband bought me some
in your head now.
Yeah, well, I had a good set of noise-cancelling headphones, but the cushiony bit started to disintegrate, so my husband bought me a new set for Christmas of the Bose noise-cancelling headphones, and I tell you, people just sneak up on me all the time when I'm wearing them because they are so good at blocking out sound. This is not a paid endorsement, but it blocks out my daughter and her
singing. But if they wanted to pay you, you would take it, right?
If they could just give me a lifetime supply of these things when these ones wear out, I'd be perfectly happy. Yeah. No, so no, that whole listening, she can't work without music, and I think a lot of creative people are the same. There was a time where I couldn't work with any exterior sound interrupting me, but I'm thinking those were probably days where I was so paranoid about protecting my writing time because I was working full-time as well and running two young children from sports here and there all over the place and after school activities, that protecting that writing time became paramount. So any kind of extraneous noise was just irritating. But now I've been writing full-time for the last 10, 12 years. I find music just helps me get into state, for want of a better word.
Definitely. It definitely does. I've really stayed away from the noise canceling headphones because I think it would spook me not hearing things. And I know that from years in newsrooms, newspaper newsrooms, eavesdropping was the most useful form of communication. It was the only way. It was way and above any, memos you got. So yeah. I said there were two kinds of people, and particularly in newsrooms, there were either rabbit ears like me, or there were the people who were just, heads down, paid no attention to anything else, and you had to go up and shake them to get their attention. I'm definitely a rabbit ears. So it fascinates me how differently people respond to, I guess, stimuli.
Yeah.
So that brings me to another one of my fascinations. Are you? I want to say you're left-handed. No?
No, I'm right-handed.
No, you're right-handed. Okay. On your right hand is your ring. And whenever I ask this, I hold up my hand, so you have to get a bit. Is your ring finger or your index finger longer?
Ring finger.
Ring finger. By a lot?
Just a bit more than 1/4 of an inch, I suppose.
And is it different from your left hand to your right hand?
Nope.
No? Okay. Well, I have no idea what any of that means.
When you figure it out, let me know.
When I figure it out, I'm going to have this fascinating study of writers because I'm asking everybody. But it's just this bizarre thing I'm interested in. Okay. It's better than saying, because the other thing I'm interested in hands is like if you hold your hand up away from you and you put your thumb up next to it, can you make your thumb, just the top part of it, turn down so it's like at a right angle from your index finger?
Oh, my mother calls that a money thumb, if your thumb curls out and bends back like
a money?
that. Money thumb, yeah.
Money. Good, I like that.
Yeah, I don't have money thumbs. I'm obviously going to have to work till I die.
I have a money thumb. I had never heard that. I'm so glad I asked you. Okay.
Your life is enriched.
There we go. Literally, huh? So now I'll have to ask people if they have a money thumb. And total switch here, but I like to know this too. As a writer, do you find when you look back through your manuscripts, do you find bad habit words or phrases?
I tend to have different ones for each book, but it will be the same one throughout that book. It's like the last book that I wrote, I used the word intense or intensity so many times. Each book seems to have a different word. And I do my best. I use the synonym finder, I use Roget's thesaurus, I use the Collins thesaurus, I change sentence structures completely to avoid having these things happen too often in a book.
That's really. Do you have any idea what triggers it?
No, it might. Maybe it comes down to the theme of the book. Like the book that I turned in recently, the characters had had a very brief, very intense relationship and a very short marriage that left them both very much burned when it fell apart. So that intensity still exists between them. See, I'm still using intensity because it's the word for it. Like they're like metal filings drawn to a magnet. They can't not be drawn together. They have to be so far apart for it not to happen. So as soon as they're back in one another's sphere, they're just drawn to one another. And that is intense.
So as you said, maybe you find a word that encapsulates the theme of the book for you.
Yeah, it's not a conscious thing, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another weird question. If your writing were a color, what would it be?
I think that depends on what I'm writing. When I'm writing my desires, I would say they're probably rich shades of red and purples, like through to fairly dark purple. When I work on the suspense novels, there's some very dark themes in there, so there'd be a lot of black and there'd be a lot of shades of purple. Yeah.
And the suspense novels have you been working on those for long?
On and off. The first one that I finished, it probably took me about 8 years because I just dabbled in it. But when I actually sat down to work on it seriously, and that would have been 2016, I wrote most of that book in probably 3 or 4 months. Yeah.
Do you find, because that is a darker book, I would imagine, compared to the desires, do you find that affects your outlook?
You'd have to ask the people who live with me. I don't know.
Interesting.
I'm always happiest when I'm writing, like I'm a lot easier to live with when I'm writing, except for the week before my book is due. Then apparently I'm not so nice to be around. Which I think is fine. By all means, stay away from me. Just feed me. Don't expect me to feed you.
That works, right?
Yeah. I don't ask for much.
So, do you have a book that was the absolute easiest you've ever written?
Easy? I'm not sure. I don't think any of them are ever what I would call easy. Oh, one that was probably more of a joy to write was the book that was released at the end of last year, the Christmas Baby Bonus. That story was probably, I don't know, it was the first time in a while that I felt like I was writing the story I wanted to tell. Do you know what I mean? Not so much that I was filling the expectations of the line I write for. And I know a lot of people say romance writing is formulaic, and it's really no more formulaic than any type of writing. But when you're writing series romance for a specific line, there are reader expectations for that line that you have to fulfill. And when guidelines change, of course, you have to change your style of writing, or the style of story you're writing. And that particular book, I just felt like I nailed it on every aspect. I felt really, really proud of it when I finished it. Yeah.
That feels so wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, do you celebrate finishing a book or beginning a book or publishing a book? Are you good to yourself?
No, I'm not good to myself. I am absolutely terrible to myself. I wish I celebrated more, and I keep telling myself I will. When I'm under contract, I'm usually too busy clearing the decks in my office and getting ready to write my next book to really celebrate, because when I'm under contract, my deadlines tend to be spaced at a certain distance. So hopefully I will have releases closer together. This time round, though, when I write with a friend who lives in another part of the country. And in the morning, we text one another when we're ready to start. And we actually write in 15-minute blocks of time, and we kind of race one another. And it's not unusual to get up to 600 words done in that 15-minute moment, which when you do an hour of that, that's nearly 2,500 words, which for us is just fantastic. And, once we've hit word count, anything more than that, it either allows you to work on the play project, or if you've got a day off during the week planned for family reasons or whatever, or you can just build on that. And so this week I'm actually going to fly down to see her so we can have lunch together. So that's how I'm celebrating
what fun.
this book. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, one of the readers asks, if you, what's your favorite place to write and why? And wants to know if it has an inspirational view.
I would never call my neighbour's house an inspirational view.
Your poor neighbours.
It's a nice enough house. I work in my office most of the time. That's my best place. When I'm writing, I'm not looking out the window. I'm staring at the screen, and often I'm staring at the screen, not even seeing the screen. I'm just writing. Once a week, I do try to get out, in inverted commas, and I go and write in a cafe for a couple of hours. I like to kid myself with getting out and being social. But generally, I get my best word count done when I'm in my office.
The writer's version of being social is going where other people are and then ignoring them.
Yeah, and you make sure you put earbuds in so no one will speak to you because you're clearly busy.
Okay, we have another question from a reader who asks, and I love this question because it's so clear that the reader does this. The reader says, do you miss the characters and think about them once you've finished a book. And then I want to add on to that. Has that then led you ever to writing another book about those characters or touching on those characters?
It's a very good question. I tend not to keep people in my mind once that book has gone into production. And generally, if I'm writing a series, I have those books very loosely mapped in my mind before I pitch the series to my editor. So I have an idea of who those characters are going to be. That said, in the current mini-series that I'm writing, the two characters popped out in the first book, cousins of the hero. And I thought, if the series works, and if it can go beyond 3 books, those 2 women are going to need husbands. And there's a lot more characters, a lot more cousins in the woodwork that are going to need to be matched up to their perfect match. So, yeah.
What happens if you don't, say the publisher doesn't want the series to go on? Will those characters stay in your head and bug you?
No.
You are very lucky.
I've learned to be pretty good at closing the door on some things. So
I have very naggy characters. Come after me all the time. Yeah. Now, did you feel like when you were first published, and what year was your first book out?
I made my first sale in 2005, and that book was released in October of 2006. First word of advice to anybody who wants to write: if you are writing a book with a Christmas theme, don't expect it to be published in the book you sell it in the year that you sell it if you're dealing with a traditional publisher.
Yeah. Because I, of course, want to bring it out right before the holiday, and
they're already scheduled for the holiday books for that year. So,
did you feel that having that first book sold and going through the publishing process, did that change your writing process in any way?
No, I tend to be a very linear writer, and I learned many years ago that I need an outline to finish a book. In past years, I had started several books and never really gone anywhere with them because I had no idea where they wanted to go. So I've learned that for me to be able to write a book, I have to have an outline. It's a bit like when I go on a road trip. I never just meander off. I know exactly where I'm going and where I'm stopping. Well, grocery stores aren't a road trip. But I might plot that I'll stop at the vet first and get some special kidney diet food for my cat before going to the grocery store. Or, I put plans in my head all the time.
In writing, I'm very much a pantser, but I recognize that I benefited from your planning and getting to see what I got to see when I was in New Zealand. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, when you travel with a planner.
And then relax, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
So before you start to put in a plan, a plot, do you have any stories? So have you had any stories that didn't quite gel, that didn't come together for you when you wanted to plan it? And do you hold out any hope for those? In other words, do you have stories stashed away in your bottom drawer, whether physically or mentally?
When I first sold to Desire, to Harlequin, well, it was Silhouette Desire back then, but now it's Harlequin Desire, I sold the 3rd book in a trilogy. So then I went back and submitted the other 2 to them, which they subsequently bought with changes. And then I went through every other book I'd finished and pitched each one as ideas to my editor. And I pretty much sold every book that I had in the drawer. I obviously, from my very, very early days as attempting to write, I've probably got about 3 or 4 partials that I never finished, but they were rejected because of lack of conflict or whatever. And I mean, a lot of that was because I just didn't know or understand the stories enough myself to be able to bring them to life. So I think they're probably best left shrouded in dust.
So when you started writing, were you doing the planning then too, or was that?
No, I learned I needed to plan. But I had a couple of critique partners, and they said, yeah, you're doing really well at writing 3 chapters. Now tell us what happens next. And they basically bullied me and said, we won't read another word of your writing until you give us an outline. So I learned to write outlines. And then actually that taught me a much stronger love of my stories.
And so I had a sister-in-law who said she wouldn't read anything more of mine that wasn't finished because I'd give her these pieces, and she said, well, this is wonderful. What happens to these people? I don't know. I have no idea. But she said I had to finish writing it. So I started doing complete manuscripts, and I much prefer that. So maybe it's what we're nagged into early in our careers.
Yeah, well, we're creatives. Sometimes we need to be corralled into doing things. And if anything, that I think it helped make me a better writer, because story structure comes very naturally to some people, like yourself, obviously, being a pantser. But for me, I need to see that structure's there to be able to hang everything off it so that I don't spin off in a tangent that takes me into a dead end.
Well, I don't think structure came to me naturally, actually. I think I have dialogue comes readily, and I have this sense of the rhythm of the story from reading so many stories, I think. But I had to figure out and learn the 3-act structure, and I tried a lot of different approaches to it before I found one that really worked for me. And I think one of the things that has given me is when I teach writing, I think I'm pretty good at teaching that. Whereas dialogue sometimes can be tougher because it's like, well, you just shut up and listen to the voices in your head. and that's not real helpful to people.
Do you find dialogue easy to write at all, or?
Yes.
Yeah. Because that's where
I love
it. Just switch off everything and just let them go. And then you've got to go back and put in actions and tags and stuff. Because, if you just let them all fly, you kind of lose track of it.
Yes. And I know so clearly who's talking that I'm not very good about tags. And sometimes that has been one of my editors would say, who's saying this and where are they? I don't care.
Well, does it really matter?
So what's your favorite part of the writing process?
I think for me, it's when everything's flowing. It's sort of like where you're really stuck into it. That whole, when you're deep in the throes and everything's going right, and each day I can't wait to get back into the manuscript. I also love that feeling when the manuscript is finished,
Yes.
Yeah. So no, the beginning I find is often the most challenging part. It can take me as long to write an outline as it can to write a whole book. Just getting everything right in my head and then on paper.
But then you're done. See, that's my problem with outlines.
Because it's like baking a cake with no icing. You've got to have icing and filling. Or
I do love
roasting a leg of lamb with no garlic pushed under the skin and no rosemary in the dish and no onions in the pan,
You were doing better for me talking about the frosting and the icing.
See, I'm a savoury person, so get me on the savoury things.
Yeah. To me, cake, the only reason for cake is to hold up the frosting. I'm a frosting person, so maybe that's it. Maybe that's why I like to kind of just. So I have to write the frosting.
Oh, and then you go back and do the cake,
and then find my way to the cake that holds it up. And because at that point, if I do enough frosting, then I feel guilty for leaving these characters with their story untold. So yeah, I think that may be it. Talk about psychoanalyzing.
We're going to be the most well-adjusted authors out there.
Or at least we're going to recognize how we're not well-adjusted.
More accurate.
And you mentioned, we're creatives and writers. Do you think writers in particular look at the world and look at other people differently from non-writers?
Speaking from my own experience, I'm always looking for another plot, another story idea. So I think, yes, we do look at the world differently. I'm always trying, like when I watch the news, I'm always trying to understand people's motivation for doing things, and I wonder how I can use that with a character. Yeah, you're always analysing without realising you're analysing. You're looking at the world from a different aspect. It's not just there. You're looking at how you can use it.
So a reader asks specifically where our stories come from. And she says, I know one author who dreams her stories. Another has a character suddenly taking up residence in her head. And so how are your beautiful stories born? Can you trace back where your stories come from?
One of my books, I very definitely can. I think it was my 4th or 5th story with Harlequin, the Rossellini's Revenge Affair, where my eldest daughter was listening to Usher at the time, and he had a song where he was, I think it was called Confessions, where he had a girlfriend, but he also had a girl on the side, and the girl on the side fell pregnant. And I thought, oh, okay, obviously that's not a heroic thing to do. But how would his girl, if his girl was his wife, how would she feel? And what would happen if he died and she found out about this other person? And then everything just exploded into an entirely alpha male driven story. I don't know whether that story would be as popular in today's market because...
But he died, huh?
Oh, yeah, the shithead husband died. Was I allowed to say that?
So who was... it's done now. So who was the alpha hero?
The alpha hero was the brother of the mistress, who also died. But the baby lived.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Ooh, cool. So tell that title again.
Rossellini's Revenge Affair.
So if you didn't write, what would you do for work?
That's an interesting question. I have previous experience both in secretarial work, as a sales rep, as a party plan manager, as an office manager, as a PA. The idea of going back to any of those fills me with dread, and I still frequently have nightmares about having to go back and work for my old boss, which is really, really not healthy. But I think if I had to do anything, I would try and find something different that I hadn't done before. So, yeah, I prefer not to think about it because I'm very good at compartmentalising stuff I don't want to think about. I prefer to think that I will be writing until my dying days.
So I have multiple questions stemming out of that. Is that the boss that you have nightmares about? Is that the one you got to quit to write full time, or did he or she come earlier in your career?
I quit working for him to write full time.
Ooh, what did that feel like?
It was scary, but very freeing at the same time. It was starting to impact on my health, the demands of my day job, plus writing at night till 1 o'clock in the morning as well. And between each of them, I probably wasn't giving my best to either, nor my family. And one day I came home from work and bit the head off my youngest daughter. She came running downstairs. She'd been looking at photographs with my husband, and she was so excited about these old photos that she'd been looking at, and she wanted to tell me all about it, and all I did was just basically rip her a new one, and she burst into tears. And then my husband growled at me for upsetting her because they'd been having such a nice time. Aww. And he said, look, this has got to stop. One of us has got to quit quit their job. And I thought, well, you can't. So that night when he was at work, I wrote my resignation. And it's weird. As soon as I did that, I just felt this incredible weight lift off my shoulders. And it was very freeing. And yeah, like I said, it was scary because my income was contributory to the household. It wasn't just for frills and fancy furbelows. But yeah, it was good. It was good. My husband wholeheartedly supported me. He was also surprised that I did it that quickly. He thought we might discuss it a bit longer, but no.
Sometimes when something is right, it just is right.
Yeah, and that was very definitely right.
Now, see, but what I want to know is how it felt to take the letter into the boss who was giving you nightmares. I want that moment of retribution. And has he died?
I actually just left it on his desk. I left the note on his desk. And after he read it, he came and spoke to me. I think he thought I was just being reactive to things that had been happening in the office prior to that. But interestingly enough, he hired 2 people to take over my position.
That's telling, isn't it?
So I found that telling. He would probably say that he was like spreading the responsibility so that if one person left, he wasn't left without full support, so to speak. So, yeah, it was a difficult situation, not one I would want to repeat, and that's probably why I still have nightmares.
But what's the biggest thing that people think they know about your genre that isn't so?
I think I kind of touched on that. I think one of the things that really bugs me is that they think it's a formula that you really just change around the names and the storylines are just a little, but that it's all pretty much the same. It's no more formulaic than a murder mystery or a sci-fi fantasy or anything like that. Every story has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And every story has to deliver on a reader expectation. So I just prefer to write, most of the time, stories that have very happy endings because I believe everyone deserves a happy ending, unless, of course, you're an absolute a-hole, in which case you deserve everything you get. But, I just think sometimes people like to poke fun at things that they don't understand or fear. It's like, why are so many people afraid of people having a fulfilling relationship? Because that's what romance is about. It's about fulfilling relationships. And why do you feel the need to belittle that?
Good question.
I don't understand that. I don't understand. I mean, I don't belittle cowboy stories, the deep down and dirty tobacco chewing cowboy stories from the old Western styles. Every style of writing has its value, so why put any of it down?
An excellent question. So we do run into that a lot from people who react to romance. It's such an odd thing, and they say such rude things, and you think, really, you're gonna say that?
There is a comeback for that. Goodness, I'm sure your mother would be very embarrassed to hear you speak like that.
Yes,
I'm sure she taught you better manners than that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, okay. I'm not sure this is in my mind. It is sort of related about covers, and a reader specifically asked because romance gets a lot of grief about the covers, but this reader specifically asked when the cover image doesn't match the character description, and the reader says, "A pet peeve of mine." How does that feel to you as the author?
Oh, it's a pet peeve of mine too, especially when I spend several hours on completing art fact sheets and looking for poses to send through to the art department that work for the scenes that I've described for the art fact sheets. Yeah, I kind of wonder why I even bother sometimes, because quite often they won't use a scene I've mentioned at all. And I did actually have one story where the heroine was short and petite and wore flowing tops over leggings to hide an early pregnancy. They actually depicted her on the cover as almost as tall as the hero and wearing a very old-fashioned pink 1950s shirtwaisted dress. I pointed out to them that the heroine was not that person, but nothing changed. So that was frustrating, but that's out of my hands. Very, very often I've had the most incredible covers. But when they come along and they're just not quite right, it's disappointing.
I think I was cleaning out my office not too long ago, and I think I just threw out most of my copies of those art facts sheets. But I part of me wanted to keep them as part of my fiction production because they sure never became reality.
Yeah. But the thing is, the people who do the covers, they're marketing people. I'm not a marketing person. So I sometimes have to just roll over and bow to their superior knowledge while gritting my teeth.
No. Because I will say, now that I'm bringing back some of the books that were published previously, and a number of them are doing better with these covers than they did with the supposed expert covers. So, nah. More for a really adult reaction.
No one said we had to be mature about it.
Okay, let me give you another question from a reader, and it's so cool. If you could write a book with any author, alive or dead, who would you want to work with and why?
Oh, both of the authors that I would like to work with are still very much alive. One is Lisa Gardner, and the other would be Linda Howard. I love how they write, and I love how they create such strong characters and storylines. So, yeah, both of them are my auto buys without even looking at what the story's about.
Do you think that connects back into the suspense that you've been working on?
I think I've always, like, deep down wanted to write suspense, but felt I needed to hone my craft with romance to begin with. When I look back, when I was at school, I had an English teacher who thought romance novels were those dreadful books. And she gave us a writing assignment one day. I remember it very vividly. She blue tacked a picture of, it was all in these dark browns and mustard colours, all colours that make me feel very uncomfortable, on the blackboard. And it was of galleons on a very, very storm-tossed sea. And she said, write a story about it. 3,000 words, start now. And I did write a story, and I finished it at home. But I didn't write. Most of the kids in the class wrote the story about the people on the galleons and the storm and the people waiting for the people on the galleons. But I wrote a horror story about it being a painting that when it would change colour, and when it changed colour, the person who owned it would commit vile murders. And
did you get turned into the school psychologist?
No, I got 10 out of 10.
That was good for her.
That was the first time the teacher had ever given full marks for anything. And I think I've always had that slightly. I've wanted to write the slightly scary, the slightly suspenseful. I've always loved reading suspense and thrillers and things like that. So, yeah. I think once if my writing changes enough that I'm writing suspense full time, I may stop reading them as much, because I certainly don't read as much contemporary romance as I used to.
I think that's Partly, I find that I don't read what I'm writing at the time as much because of the kind of the mix of the voices. So I want to keep my voice in that
Yeah.
genre going along. I also think then there's the more general thing as reading as a writer, that you see the mechanisms is too strong a word, but you can see where the story's going because you know how to put it together, and so it makes it harder to read things that you write.
But every author has their own rhythm too, and I found
True.
once that I read 3 stories in a row written by the same author, and this was just in contemporary romance, and she had a distinct rhythm to how she wrote that it became predictable for me. Which spoiled my enjoyment of the story, and I decided at that point that I would not do that. Like, so it's all very well to glom onto a new author and want to read everything they've written, but I also think you need to do them a bit of a favour and not read everything they've written one straight after the other. Like, break it up with something else in between, and that way you really get to enjoy each story rather than find yourself anticipating what's going to happen next.
I absolutely agree with that, and I did virtually the same thing. It was like I discovered this new author, and this was fairly early in my writing career, and I read bam, 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 and you could see the sort of ticks, the things that kept coming back, and I came to the same conclusion. I was not going to do that again because it's the old thing of that you're reading in one time frame and you're writing in an entirely different time frame, so it's really tough on the writer to consume it at such a faster rate than it's produced.
Well, don't they say is that hard writing makes good reading or something like that?
Now, talking about readers, have you had contacts? Do you get a lot of comments? Or
I actually don't get a lot of reader mail. I've had a few. One lovely lady who's enjoyed all the books I've written, but asked me when I would please write a dark-haired virgin heroine, and I believe I did. At some age, I've had a couple of dark-haired virgin heroines. They fit for the story.
Yeah,
it was not specifically done by request. I don't tend to get a great deal of reader mail. I do have some Facebook engagement with people. They might message me and say they enjoyed reading my last book, and always it's fabulous hearing from anybody.
Yes, it is.
I mean, I appreciate that they take the time to let me know what they thought. So, yeah.
I was just thinking about you being so nice to put in her or have her request in mind and know that it fit your story. I had an editor who asked me to do amnesia story, and I decided instead to make it a fake amnesia story.
Yeah, that would be hard.
But I guess I wasn't as good at doing what was wanted. Aren't we surprised that I'm now an independent author?
Lovely woman, doesn't play well with others.
Sure I do. I just don't take orders real well. Okay, so of your books, 41 you said? I'm really impressed that you know the number, because I know I think I'm in the mid 40s, but I'm not real sure on the count anymore. But
I'm periodically.
You keep track?
Yeah.
Oh.
I try. Well, I try.
You with the spreadsheet for the grocery store. I can see that.
Yeah.
Will you keep track of mine too, please?
Oh, no, I have enough work. You have an assistant. I don't. Your assistant can set that up for you, I'm sure.
She doesn't know how many books I have either.
It's interesting because it's often the first question that people ask me is, how many books have you done?
Do
And
they?
then it's, are they published? It's like, well,
Oh,
there's a surprise.
yeah. Yes. Okay, so which one of those books is the best one for somebody who's never read anything of yours to start?
Ooh.
That's a really good introduction to your writing.
I would like to think that people could pick any book of mine up and think, wow, this is great. I'm going to read her entire backlist and front list. But I would say that whichever one is the latest release. So for me, the latest release would be the Christmas Baby Bonus, which came out in December last year. And then in June this year, I have a new book called Tangled Vows. But
Good.
So I
Okay.
have quite an extensive backlist for people to choose from. They're more than welcome. Just troll through Amazon and pick as many as you like.
And do you think that any of those books, though, in your backlist have been overlooked a little bit by readers, so that even your loyal readers might not have gotten to that one?
I don't know. I've looked. I mean, I look at my sales figures and I cross my eyes and try to understand things. But overall, I think most of my books seem to hit a certain level of readership consistently. There was one story that I wrote called Defiant Mistress, Ruthless Millionaire. That was actually a book that transpired out of a character from a 3-book miniseries that I'd done called The Rogue Diamonds. And that last story, I really wanted to write it, and so they did write it, and they titled it similarly to the previous 3, but they didn't give it the cover flash that the previous 3 had because the first 3 books were 3 really good friends, and this last book was the business rival of one of them, and he so needed his own story. He was so gorgeous. So I wrote that too, and they did. But it's possibly not that obvious that it was linked to the previous 3 stories in the series. But yeah, they're all there. They're all listed on my website. So yeah.
Well, that's good, because I worry about the little books that get overlooked. That's why I want them out there. So, okay, have I skipped any questions that you wanted to answer? Is there anything you want to tell us?
Oh, there was one where you were talking about a reader's story or letter. I was thinking of something before. It probably doesn't count, but it has to do with Rossellini's revenge affair and my eldest daughter. And she was a teenager at the time, and she was reading it. And she was obviously on a school break of some description. And I'm up in my office working away, and she's in her bedroom reading. And she got so mad, she stormed up to my office and yelled at me for being so mean to my characters, and then just stormed off again. And it was like, wow, where did that come from? So, yeah. So,
yeah, but that's terrific. She was so involved with the characters and the story. That's wonderful. I love that.
Really tickled my fancy. Yeah, although I don't generally like being yelled at.
Sometimes it's a reward, right? Oh, you know what? I have another question I want to ask you, and this is totally out of the blue. I read this somewhere, and I thought, what a great question. I have no idea what I would answer to it. So it's got to be a good one to ask other people. What advice have you been given that you have ignored? What good advice have you been given that you've ignored, and how did it turn out?
Oh, I've been given a lot of advice to try indie publishing. I'll let you know how that turns out when I do it. How's that? That's probably
good. Yeah.
That's probably the greatest, strongest advice that people have been giving me more recently. I do frequently feel frustrated about writing within a set guideline, and would like to take things along different tracks. So yes,
So we'll have to do a sequel podcast to find out the answer
what
to
did
that
Yvonne
one.
do next?
That's fair. Yes. And where can people find out more about you and your books?
Okay, I'm on social media. I have a website, which is www.yvonnelindsay.com. All the links to my other social media presences are there. I'm on Twitter and Facebook, very sporadically on Instagram. Twitter tends to be my stream of consciousness thoughts, like what happens when a bag of rice falls from the top shelf in my pantry and hits the kitchen floor.
I can tell you that.
Yeah, well, I discovered that one yesterday. And Facebook is where I have most of my reader engagement. I really enjoy Facebook. I try to post there every day, something new, sometimes something about me or my life or me or my books or something I've seen recently that I find interesting and want to share with people. So yeah, I'm accessible.
And tell people it's Yvonne with a Y.
Yes.
And Lindsay with an AY. What do you know? Is there a difference? Is there a nationality difference between AY and EY?
No idea. I do know our Lindsays are Scots. This is my own name, so my married name. So yeah, it's who I am.
Okay. Well, now we are going to wrap up here with a rapid fire either or section. Then let's see, what can I spring on you? Coffee or tea?
See, I'm such a fence sitter. People call me Splinter Bum. I drink tea in the morning. I drink tea in the morning before 11, coffee after that.
Oh, that's interesting. I usually think of it as reversed. Huh. Okay.
I have one coffee a day, but it's huge.
You have to choose one. You're going to have ice cream or you're going to have cake?
Cake.
Okay. Hiking boots or cowboy boots?
Cowboy boots.
I can tell this is painful for you. Pickup or sports car?
Pickup. Ever since my knee replacement, sports cars are completely out of the question. Not without a crane.
No shifting. Yeah. House decorating or gardening?
House decorating. I do not garden.
Paint or wallpaper?
Wallpaper.
Ooh. I have chipped
very
off
neutral wallpaper.
I have chipped off a lot of wallpaper in my life. So, paper plates or best china?
Best china.
Binge watch or make the watching last as long as possible?
Binge. Instant gratification.
And we know the answer to this one if we were listening carefully. Appetizer or dessert?
Appetizer.
Heels or slippers?
Slippers.
Cruise or trekking vacation?
Cruise. River cruise, not sea cruise. I did a river cruise last year. Can't wait to do another one.
Oh, where'd you do it?
We went from Amsterdam to Budapest.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Hot air balloon or train trip?
Train.
Cat or dog?
Cat, only because I have a cat.
And the cat would never forgive you if you said dog, right?
Oh, God, no. Like, she tolerates when the grandpuppy, he's a German Shepherd, 2-year-old German Shepherd, comes round to visit, but he's terrified of her. And he has 3 cats at home, but he knows with Dobby that she will just clean him up. So, yeah. Yeah, an arthritic, kidney disease-riddled, skinny black cat, and he's scared of her.
Dogs have good sense.
But it's probably very wise. It would mess up his pretty face if she had a go, I can tell you that.
Nail polish or bare nails?
Nail polish.
Including the toenails?
From time to time.
Color or clear?
Colour and pretty coloured stickers. Like,
okay. We're getting fancy.
Yeah, water transfers. You have to have a look at my Facebook page. Every now and then I post nail art.
All right. We'll have to see that. Last one. Go for the best first or save the best for last.
Go for the best first, because you never know if you're going to be around for the last bit.
Okay. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Yvonne. It's been such a delight to spend more time with you. Although I got to say, I would think I'd probably rather do it in New Zealand if they would have me back.
Oh, absolutely. It'd be fabulous to have you back.
I keep hinting. But we really, it's a lot of fun talking with you and catching up. And we hope you all listeners will come back next week to hear another author on Authors Love Readers, and we'll have another conversation, and see you then. That's the show for this week. Hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for joining Authors Love Readers podcast. Remember, you can always find out more about our guest authors in the show notes, and you can find out more about me at www.patriciamclinn.com. You can also send in questions to be asked of future authors at podcast@authorslovereaders.com. Until next week, wishing you lots of happy reading. Bye. If you like this podcast, we hope you'll consider becoming a supporter through our Patreon page. With a small monthly donation as little as $1 a month, you can help with the hosting and editing costs that make the show possible. To thank our Patreon supporters, we offer them special bonuses. Find out more at authorslovereaders.com or at patreon.com/authorslovereaders. That's PATREON. We also hope you'll subscribe to this podcast and leave us a review wherever you listen to us. Both of those help more folks find the podcast. Of course, the very best way for other folks to find the podcast is for you to tell them about it. So we sure hope you will.